Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of Wokingham Borough Council's Executive. My name's Stephen Conway. I'm the leader of the Council and Executive Member for Housing Partnerships and the Local Plan, and I'll be chairing the meeting. Just a few housekeeping points, if I may, to start with. Please ensure that any mobile devices or mobile phones are switched off. If you're participating via Teams, as some people are, I think, this evening, when you're not speaking, please mute your microphones. And please also note that the meeting is currently being webcast live. There are no fire drills planned this evening, so if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building via the nearest exit and gather at muster point 2, which is located in the car park at the rear of the building. And we should take seriously the fire alarm going off. I've been in the local plan examination hearings all this week, and it went off at 5:05 yesterday. So we had to leave the building, and then were able to return about 20 minutes later. So there are no planned fire alarms, so if it does go off, please take it seriously. Now, before I introduce you, or rather ask my colleagues to introduce themselves, I'm going to just explain to everyone in the room who the assorted people online and in the room behind the councillors on this table are. And I'm going to start over there with Matt Pope. Matt is the Executive Director for Adults, Children's and Public Health. I think I got that right. And then we have Priya Patel, who's the Head of Democratic Services. Susan Parsonage, who is the Chief Executive of the Council. Andrew Moulton, who's the Chief Monitoring Officer of the Council. And Graham Ebers, who is the Chief Finance Officer and Deputy Chief Executive. And online we also have Sally Watkins, and Sally is Director of Corporate Community and Change. I think I got that right this time. I think we also have Emma Cockrell, who is Director of Children's Services, and Dave Allen, who is the Head of the Council's Communications. I think that's everybody. I can see Leon is there, who's going to be asking a question later on. Okay. I'm now going to ask my colleagues around the table here with me to introduce themselves, and I'm going to start with Mark this time.
Good evening, I'm Mark Ashwin. I'm Executive Member for Economic Development, Sport, Leisure and the Arts.
Hello, I'm Adrian Betteridge. I'm the Executive Councillor for Active Travel, Transport and Highways.
Hi, I'm Lou Timlin, the Executive Member for Community Safety and Public Protection.
Good evening, I'm Catherine Harding, the Executive Member for Environment and Climate Emergency.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Prue Bray. I'm the Deputy Leader of the Council and the Lead Member for Children's Services.
Good evening, everybody. I am the Executive Member for Finance and Governance. I'm Imogen Shepherd Bay.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Martin Alder. I'm the Head of Executive Member for Planning and Enforcement.
Good evening, I'm Rachel Bishop-Firth and I'm the Executive Member for Resident Services, Inclusion and Fighting Poverty.
Good evening, my name is David Hare and I'm Executive Member for Adult Services, Health and Wellbeing.
Right, thank you. As everybody is here, as far as I can see, I think we can say there are no apologies for absence. So I'll move on, if I may, to the minutes of the previous meeting. And we're asked to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of October. I hope you've all had a chance to look at those. Are you all content that we agree those minutes as accurate? Can I just ask you to show?
I'm not sure I was there.
You weren't there, so yep, that's fine. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll just sign those. Right, now we move on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest on any of the items on the agenda? No? Right, thank you. Now we move to Item 53, statement from the leader. Wokingham Borough Council should soon know the shape of the final local government finance settlement for the next 3 years. Today, the government published its policy statement, though it would take us some time to work out the specific financial implications for Wokingham. At this stage, however, it does not look encouraging. In the summer, the government consulted on a redistribution of funding support for councils, which, if carried through, would see less money given to some councils and more to others. Our calculation is that the proposals would lead to Wokingham's having its government revenue support cut by around £50 million over the 3-year settlement period. If ministers have persisted with their proposals, by 2028-29, we would receive minimal revenue funding support from the government to enable us to deliver vital services to our community. And in these circumstances, we'd become almost wholly reliant on what we raise locally, mainly through council tax, but to a lesser extent through fees and charges. Even increasing the council tax to the maximum allowed, however, would not provide enough money to cover off the loss of government funding and the impact of inflation and the increase in demand for our services, especially in areas of statutory responsibility such as adults and children's social care. To protect our community, the Council has been campaigning vigorously to persuade the government at least to moderate its proposed redistribution to prevent us from being forced to deeply unpalatable savings and income generation measures. I have written to successive Secretaries of State and their respective ministers, not once, but several times, setting out our case for a funding floor below which no council should fall. We have worked closely with our local MPs to build up support for our arguments, and Wokingham's Chief Finance Officer and I have been to Parliament to explain the need for a funding floor. We have also worked with other councils across the country that face a similar loss of funding. While we would struggle to cope with substantially less government support, many of these other councils would face insolvency. We have therefore been able to secure many willing allies whose voices are reinforcing the message that we have tried to convey to ministers. The Council's campaign has been backed locally by our voluntary and charitable sector partners and by the wider Wokingham public, who expressed their support in record numbers, and I'm immensely grateful to them for their help. The battle is not over. Despite our negative first impressions of today's government policy statement, we will continue to campaign vigorously for a fair deal for our community, right through until the full figures become available to us in late December. Thank you. So we're now moving on to public question time. And the first question is from Maggie Ward. Would you like to come up to the table, Maggie? And if you, when you're ready and sitting comfortably, if you just press the button in the middle of the microphone, that will switch it on. And if you'd like to ask your question, which I think is directed to Catherine.
It is, yes. Thank you and good evening. When will the council upgrade the refuse collection to wheelie bins for recycling, bottles, glass, small electrical textiles, in line with other councils?
Thanks for your question, Maggie. We've made, as you'll be aware, a number of significant changes to the service to improve recycling rates, our environmental performance, and at the same time to reduce costs. And these do include the sealable green recycling bags to minimise the effect of wet weather on paper and cardboard, food waste collections, which commenced in 2019, and more recently the wheeled bins for refuse as part of our fortnightly collection arrangement, or alternating weekly collection. The amendments have resulted in a recycling rate of over 58%, which is estimated to put Wokingham within the top 15 of all councils' performance. So notwithstanding this success, we continue to look for improvements for customers and improved efficiency. And we've recently gone through an extensive competitive procurement process to secure a new contractor for domestic waste collection, and Biffa will be providing this service from the 1st of June 2026. Within that contract, we have secured a greater use of technology to support collection efficiency and real-time information, customer service improvements, greener vehicles and social value outcomes. Residents will be engaged ahead of the commencement of the service if there are collection day changes or any other service changes for those households, which are expected to be a minority of the households would have any change to their collection arrangements on the 1st of June. Looking ahead, the Council is currently evaluating the collection of glass from households from the first half of 2027, and flexible plastics recycling is also expected to be introduced around the same time, that would be in line with national legislation. And at the moment, there are no plans to switch from recycling bags to wheelie bins, and that's mainly due to the overall benefits of doing so compared to the costs. Recycling bags are free to collect from a number of hubs around the borough, and we will be evaluating the containers required for glass as part of the plans. You asked around small electrical items and textiles, and where these have reached the end of their life, they can be taken to the household waste recycling centres. And you might be aware that alongside our RE3 partners, we have also just announced a partnership with Anglo Doorstep Collections, who will collect reusable small items, including electricals. And many residents already donate to local charity shops, use community giving or sales pages, and we hope that will continue. But that's just an additional option to make it very easy to give items another life and support reuse from your doorstep.
Maggie, do you have a supplementary you'd like to ask?
It was when were the wheelie bins coming in to replace the green bags?
So just to clarify, we currently don't have any plans to replace the green bags with wheelie bins. You might be aware there is currently a consultation alongside our partners in RE3 about the longer term waste disposal arrangements that we do in partnership with Reading and Bracknell councils. And this is all to inform a potential future contract, which will also go live from 2031. So, yeah, there are a number of pros and cons, we know, between the bags and the wheelie bins, but just to clarify, at this time, we don't have any plans to move away from the bags and towards wheelie bins.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Our next question is from Derek Clockworthy, and I think that Derek is present online. Derek, can you hear me? We can't hear you, Derek, so if you can hear me, could you unmute yourself?
Sorry, I was on mute there, talking to myself.
No, that's okay. It's a common experience. I do it often. Would you like to ask your question, Derek?
Yes, I'll do so. So, yeah, thank you for your time, everybody. The question I had was, committee reports earlier this year highlighted pressures on the specialist SEND placements and noted that more mainstream schools are reporting they can't meet certain pupils' needs. Could the council explain what steps are being taken to ensure that decisions about reintegration into mainstream settings are based on children's needs rather than availability of places, and how schools' own assessment of their ability to meet needs are taken into account?
Okay, Prue, I think that's directed at you.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Clockworthy. So a significant number of children supported by education, health and care plans maintained by Woking Borough Council are educated within mainstream settings, and decisions on suitable educational placements are led by a child's needs, and a school's views on whether it can meet those needs are a core component of those decisions. And on occasions where a child is experiencing challenges within their placement, schools can and are expected to access a range of advice, guidance and support that's commissioned or provided by Woking Borough Council. And this includes, but is not limited to, Wokingham's Multi-Agency Inclusion Clinic, known as the MIC, I think that's how you pronounce it, but I'm going to call it the Multi-Agency Inclusion Clinic. Specialist outreach services, which are delivered by Addington School, Highwood, Foundry College, education psychologist surgeries, and the Learning Support Service. And reintegration or strategies to increase attendance are planned in partnership with relevant services, the families and the schools.
Right, thank you. Thank you for that.
Do you have a supplementary, Derek?
No, that was fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Derek. David, could you just come up to the front? Yeah, I think it's very visible. Yeah. Would you like to ask your question when you're sitting comfortably? If you just press the button in the middle of the console there, that's it.
Okay. This is directed at you, Mr. Conway. The Community Infrastructure Levy, the mechanism for development contributions by developers, has been used by Wokingham Council as an unjust tool, causing severe financial harm to residents. In my case, £292,174.11. I have been forced to take out a second mortgage at high interest rate, paying £2,311 every month. I have already paid £40,000 in interest alone. It has shattered our finances, destroyed our mental health, and inflicted immeasurable stress on me and my family. Enforcement notices were issued. We were told to demolish our new house. Wokingham have even threatened us with custodial sentences. We have lived under the fear of bankruptcy and of my elderly parents, who I support, being forced into council care as a result of Wokingham's zero-tolerance approach. Jeff Brooks, leader of West Berkshire Council, has written to you explaining how he has implemented a review and refund scheme, reimbursing residents who were unfairly penalised. Matthew Pennycook, MP, the Housing Minister, has said, SIL was never intended to be used this way. MPs Helen Maguire, Jeremy Hunt, Greg Stafford, Tom Tugendhat, Laura Trott and Florence Eshalomi are all supportive of those affected by this SIL injustice. I would therefore ask you directly, why is Wokingham still taking this aggressive approach towards their own residents, and when will Wokingham start singing from the same hymn sheet as West Berkshire?
Thank you for your question, David. I know this is a matter of great importance to you. I'm aware of cases elsewhere in the country where small administrative errors have led to potentially excessive SIL charges. The Council does not consider the circumstances of this particular case to be an administrative error or a minor discrepancy. The circumstances arisen through breaches of planning permission. The property in question was built more than 10 metres from where it should have been, beyond the defined red line of the planning consent. To clarify, the siting of a property is not a statutory requirement for the Council's building control to confirm. It is the responsibility of the landowner and their contractor to make sure the property is correctly sited in line with the planning consent. This breach came to light when the Council was investigating a separate enforcement case relating to unauthorised business use to the rear of the site. Due to the breach of planning consent, a retrospective application was requested to regularise the use. An application was not forthcoming, and the Council considered it necessary to serve an enforcement notice. The enforcement notice was served for the erection of 2 dwellings without planning permission, as a temporary dwelling was erected during the construction period, and this dwelling had not been removed following completion of the new dwelling. The enforcement notice was appealed, and in May 2023, retrospective planning permission was granted for 2 dwellings. Whilst an applicant can apply for self-build relief for intended works, the SIL regulations and guidance are very clear that this is not available when development is retrospective. Self-build relief also cannot be applied for more than 1 dwelling at a time, with it being a requirement that the dwelling will be the applicant's sole or main residence for at least 3 years. We are not overzealous in pursuing SIL and would look reasonably at small mistakes by residents who are not familiar with planning regulations. Building a property more than 10 metres from where you have consent is not the same as failing to tick the right box. Do you have a supplementary, David?
Yes, I do. Mr. Conway, I requested under the Freedom of Information Act details of how many SIL-related enforcement notices this council has issued in the last 3 years. Since 2023, the council has issued 49 SIL-related enforcement notices to residents undertaking building projects. This unusually high number suggests not merely routine oversight, but a systemic issue within the council's planning and SIL enforcement teams. Wokingham Borough Council is required to publish an annual infrastructure funding statement. But despite this statutory obligation, the council's statement fails to accurately disclose how much income it actually receives from SIL enforcement action. It states that in the financial year 24-25, revenue collected from SIL-related breaches was £42,928. It appears this is not the amount of SIL duty, but just the fines from late payment and breaches. In July 24, I alone paid almost £300,000 to the council, but it omits to record this in a statement along with all the other revenue it unfairly collected. This omission prevents meaningful public accountability and raises serious concerns that enforcement income may be obscured from scrutiny. I further allege that the council officers engage in intrusive monitoring practices, including Google Earth Pro, aerial photography and drone-based surveillance, all used to track household building works. These methods appear to be used not just to assist residents, but to identify supposed infractions, trigger retrospective planning requirements, or impose SIL charges arising from minor paperwork errors, missing forms or timing mistakes. Even Thames Valley Police have commented, "It does not make it right that you are doing this in the course of your work." Residents deserve accountability. Residents deserve transparency. Residents deserve protection from any enforcement regime that might prioritise revenue over fairness. I therefore request a full independent investigation into Wokingham Borough Council's SIL enforcement practices, including the use of surveillance tools, officer conduct and any financial motivations. An audit of all SIL enforcement revenue collected since 2015 and an explanation for omission from published infrastructure funding statements, an external oversight carried out by an appropriate regulatory body, independent inspector or government authority such as the Planning Officers Society. Given the volume of enforcement actions, the unexplained omissions in the statutory funding statement and the deeply troubling reports of surveillance-style monitoring, please could you explain clearly and on the public record why residents should trust that your administration has allowed a culture of aggressive revenue-driven enforcement to take root, and will you commit to an independent investigation to determine whether these practices amount to systemic misconduct within the council?
Thank you for your supplementary, which was very long and very detailed, and mainly was a statement rather than a question, but I allowed you to give your statement because I know this is a matter of importance to you. It won't surprise you to know that I do not accept most of what you've said. If you wish to pursue your request for an independent inquiry, I would like to see that in writing as a formal request, and then we will give you a considered response to that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Right. I think our next question is from Leon Cook. Leon, you're getting to be a well-known figure at our meetings. Although you're not here in person, good evening and welcome. Would you like to ask the question that you've tabled, please?
I will do so. I think the last person in question might need to press the button.
Oh, right, yes, sorry. Thank you. Right, Leon, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Councillor Conway.
And your question doesn't look as though it's going to be as long as the last one.
Probably not. So we'll get to it. By the way, whoever is the tailor of your colleague to the right, I'd love to know. Extraordinary stuff.
Yes, we're all very envious, yes.
Quite. So the council, so this is a question for Councillor Harding. The council has identified £100,000 in savings from removing litter bins. What is the total number of bins that you are proposing to remove across the borough and the Thames ward as part of the council's cost-cutting exercise? And how much will the reduction in Thames save, please?
Thanks for your question, Leon. Just to clarify, the £100,000 expected annual saving through the reduction of litter bins is currently a proposal. It was discussed at the Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 4th of November, and along with the rest of the budget will be finalised through Executive and full Council in February as part of the budget making process, and crucially, as we heard earlier, in light of the final details of our local government settlement. As you may have seen in the overview and scrutiny papers, this is identified as a saving proposed to be achieved from the second year of our current midterm financial plan, i.e. from April 2027. The reason for this timing is twofold. With our new waste and street cleansing contract with Biffa coming into force from the 1st of June 2026, we will gain significantly more data regarding specific litter bin fill rates, and we will also be consulting with stakeholders, including the town and parish councils. Following this appraisal, there will be an assessment of the number of litter bins which could be removed. The final determination for the removal of any litter bins will be made by Executive, expected in late 2026, following a review at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Public litter bins are a vital part of keeping our borough litter free, but we know from the recent waste and street cleansing procurement process and comparison with other similar authorities that we have significantly more bins than many comparable areas. And the proposal is for a data-led review to ensure that taxpayers' money is spent as efficiently as possible.
Leon, I'm sure you've got a supplementary.
You guessed correctly. I would say that I take heed of your comments there at the beginning of this evening's meeting, Councillor Conway, because the Labour's Fair Funding Review is anything but. In fact, it's a bit of a joke. So I understand the rationale for why you need to find cost savings. But that said, given that this is identified as having a RAG rating of red, namely a low status of figure cited and project delivery, you've just basically, or Catherine just told us in her answer that this is an estimation, so you don't actually know. So the level of confidence to which you can enjoy vis-a-vis that 100,000, I would not necessarily share. I mean, marry this against the fact that the council in its recent years, Towetley Care Home, 1 million design fees written off, California Crossroads, 2.5 million spent on design and consultation alone. I can tell you, having attended Sonning and Wargrave Parish Council meetings this week, that in the event that you do put this out for consultation, in short order, what their response will be. And, you know, if this was about creating bins and a cost saving, I'd understand it. Taking it away, given the Liberal Democrat record vis-a-vis the environment, I think this is, quite frankly, madness. Therefore, my supplementary is actually quite simple. If parish councils across the borough, including in Thames, make their voices clear that they are not in support of this, will the council drop this measure?
So I think to respond to that, to be clear, litter bins do not solve litter. In some cases, we see that they actually lead to more issues where people dump things around bins. So when we're looking at this, you know, we know from, as I said, that we have a very high number of litter bins, and part of this review is making sure that what we do have is fit for purpose going forwards, because for every year that we don't address this, we don't look at where need has changed. For instance, we've seen through the pandemic, society has changed. More people have dogs, and therefore perhaps the locations where bins are needed to address that need is different to the bins that appeared in going back over the last decade. So I think it is vital that we, you know, conduct this review. We know that whenever you propose to remove something, there can be opposition, but I think it's very important we do a data-led review to ensure that we can present these are the most effective ways to have a sustainable street cleansing arrangement going forwards. Of course, parish councils, I sit on one, know their areas very well. I have some ideas within my own village and parish of bins that I suspect are not needed, and I hope all parishes will engage proactively with this to ensure that the overall offer is as efficient, effective for our residents as possible. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Leanne. Good evening. Oh, he's gone. Right, we have one more public question, and that is from Jennifer. Is Jennifer there? I think she is.
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Jennifer. I can't see you, but I can hear you.
That's fine.
Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, absolutely. A significant question for us here. So with recent children's services reports mentioning that some children remain without suitable education for extended periods of time and they're unable, therefore, to access full-time education, what procedures are in place to ensure that alternative provisions are identified correctly and arranged promptly to ensure that these provisions are suitable for children that are preventing them from actually accessing full-time education?
Right, thank you for your question. So the Department of Education's definition of children missing education is defined as children of compulsory school age who are either not registered at a school or not receiving suitable education, such as through approved alternative provision. And for this particular outcome, key performance indicator, Woking Borough are doing particularly well. The latest statistical Neighbours and England averages from October 24, which is taken on the census day, for children missing education are 0.2% and 0.47%. And at the end of Q2, we only had 10 children in Wokingham, which was 0.03% of the 5 to 16 years old population, which is among the best performing local authority areas. Apart from children missing education as defined by the government, locally we also have a system in place to monitor the school's use of modified timetables, also known as part-time timetables, often for the purposes of reintegration when a student is not ready to transit into a full-time timetable due to individual needs, including medical needs. We have established a multi-agency inclusion clinic which meets every 2 weeks to discuss appropriate education for vulnerable children via a case study and practice sharing system among schools and partner agencies. Representatives from heads of service of relevant partner agencies attend the multi-agency inclusion clinic, including educational psychologists, special educational needs, education welfare, virtual school, early help, children's social care and mental health practitioners, youth justice and the pupil referral unit. Through the process, the Forum supports schools at an early stage to maintain stable and appropriate support or placement for vulnerable pupils who may be missing from full-time education, while education welfare ensures the school's arrangements for those students needing a modified timetable are reviewed in a timely way to achieve successful integration to full-time education. And this advisory board also signposts to alternative provision placement decision-making panel to relevant support agencies or other provisions, and it has a reviewing process. I'm sorry, that's a very technical answer, but you'll get it in writing.
Despite the very technical answer, do you have a supplementary, Jennifer?
Not for now, thank you.
No,
Okay.
Thank you for your question. It is an important topic.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, that brings public questions to a close, but we do have, and this is one of the first, I think, a Parish and Town Council question from David Green. David, do you want to come forward and come up to the table? And by now you'll have gathered the way in which you use the microphone, I think. So would you like to ask your question, David?
Yes, good evening. David Green, I'm the chairman of the Winnersh Parish Council. This question came up in one of our recent full council meetings. So, Woking Borough Council committed to investigate the planning status of a Best Western hotel, which is currently being used as a refugee centre. So, what we would like to understand is what was the outcome of that review or investigation? Quite straightforward.
Thank you for your question, David. I've written to the government explaining the problems associated with the hotel, and I understand that the government is committed to closing hotels, though the timing of their individual closures remains unclear. After careful investigation, our conclusion is that the planning system is not the best way to deal with the problems associated with the hotel. Whilst it could be argued that there is a reasonable basis to claim breach of planning control due to a material change of use, having taken some time to review the High Court Epping Forest decision with regards to the Bell Hotel, we believe that there is a clear precedent that enforcement action against asylum hotels would not be expedient given the Home Office's statutory duties to accommodate asylum seekers and the absence of a serious planning harm. So we've gone through very carefully the implications of that Epping Forest High Court decision, and we believe it wouldn't be expedient for the council to pursue the planning system as a means of addressing the challenges of the hotel. Now, whilst the current hotel-based model is not working well for either residents in the hotel or the wider community, any transition to an alternative must be carefully managed to avoid unintended consequences that could worsen outcomes for both asylum seekers and the local community. And I've written to the Home Office to urge its officers to work closely with Woking and Borough Council to develop a sustainable solution that reflects local capacity and mitigates risks. And currently there is no national alternative being offered to the use of hotels. We would very much favour an alternative national model. And obviously we are concerned about the implications of adopting a dispersed strategy within the borough may be, as opposed to a hotel accommodation strategy. So we look to the government to try and develop a national alternative to the use of hotels, and we will continue until the position is clear to review this matter and maintain the position that we will, if necessary, go back and look at the planning enforcement issues, but at this stage, we don't believe it would be expedient.
Okay, thank you very much.
Do you have a supplementary, David?
No, if we could just have that in writing so I can share that with my colleagues, that would be fabulous.
Indeed, I will very happily make sure you get that in writing.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Needless to say, you're very welcome to stay, but I have this feeling It's an offer that you may want to refuse. Okay, thank you. So there are, I believe, no councillor questions. Thank you, Priya. So we're now moving on to the matters for consideration. And the first of those starts on page 19 of your agenda, and it's Wokingham Borough Council School Organisation Plan 2025 to 2030. And I'm going to ask Prue to introduce this item.
Thank you, Stephen. Normally, I would only make a few comments on a report, but this is quite a significant document, so on this occasion I need to say a bit more. So this is the first time that the Council has brought together in one document all the different parts of the education system for which we are required to plan places. Early years, primary, secondary and post-16, and both mainstream and special educational needs. As a point of information, the Council has the responsibility for planning for sufficiency of places, but it only has direct control over the number of places provided for those 18 schools which are still local authority maintained schools, and that's a reducing number. This means that we can only achieve the objectives in this plan with the cooperation of our multi-academy trusts, and of course the Church of England and the Catholic Church, both of which have schools in our borough. A lot of work has gone into better modelling the projections of need, and given the accuracy of the predictions for this year, we have confidence in the new methodology, which means that the tables in the plan should be reliable enough to enable us to take the right decisions, and the figures will be reviewed every year to make sure we're on the right track. I'll just give you a quick overview of what's in it, first for mainstream and then for SEND. We're doing pretty well at early years, I'm pleased to say, and beyond early years, up until recently, mainstream school place planning locally was about making sure we had enough school places for everyone. But in the last couple of years, we've seen the impact of the falling birth rate as fewer children come into reception classes. So at the younger end, we now have too many places and have already carried out a round of reductions in admission numbers in primary schools, with more planned. And this is necessary because schools can't carry a lot of spare places due to the fact they are essentially funded per pupil. The target is to keep spare capacity to about 5%, which gives a bit of flexibility without putting school budgets under pressure. And this reduction in the number of children has not yet reached secondary schools, but it will in the next couple of years. There is one part of the borough where we still don't have enough school places, and that is the area around Shinfield Parish. And this is primarily due to the amount of housing development that's taken place. We also have other areas where there's significant housing development going on. So this plan looks at how to address that, not just for Shinfield, but potentially for other areas where demand for primary places in particular may rise. And put simply, where the pressure for places indicates that new local provision is necessary, the intention will be to look at relocating an existing school to that area. And this will help us provide places in the right location and remove overcapacity elsewhere without any school having to actually close. That's the intention. I can't, we'll be working on it. When it comes to special educational needs, we have a significant shortage of suitable school places in the borough, both in terms of special school places and in terms of resource bases and SEND units attached to mainstream schools. We were promised 2 new special schools by the Conservative government, which were due to open in 2026, and a trust has been appointed to run them. But there's been no progress at all on building them, and the current Labour government has not given us any information on what's happening, despite us pointing out to them that every year of delay will cost us over £1 million extra annually, having to source those school places out of borough, often at very expensive independent special schools. So when it comes to SEND, this plan indicates how we'll be seeking to create more local provision. But I do have to make it clear that the council's financial situation means that we don't have the money to do everything we would like to do. So it will be a question of doing the highest priority things first and seeing how far we can make the budget stretch. And then a quick word about post-16. We have school sixth forms, but we don't have any further education or sixth form colleges in the borough. We also have very limited provision in the borough for post-16 special needs education. How we widen the scope of the offer within the borough while ensuring that our sixth forms have the right capacity and that all our young people have access to suitable courses and training in colleges or elsewhere is going to be quite complicated and is linked to our emerging skills and employment strategy. So that's a summary of what's in the document. It's split into sections that deal with the different stages and types of education, but within those it's also split into geographical areas. So if you have a particular interest in one part of the borough or one element of education, you should be able to find the information you want relatively easily. The final thing that I want to say is to thank all the officers who've worked so hard to pull all these different strands together and produced a document which will provide us with a firm base for future school place planning. And that's it, unless anybody has any questions.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment, which is I've been sitting for the last 3 days in the local plan examination hearings, and school place planning has been part of the discussion in those hearings, and it is very clear that the officers in children's services have been playing a really key part in helping prepare us for the local plan, recognising the new needs that were generated by the local plan. So I think I've seen at close quarters over the last 3 days how important this work is and how much it's going to influence the educational provision we are able to provide and organise in different parts of the borough based on projections of future housing growth. So just to reinforce the point that you've made at the beginning of your statement there, I think, Prue. Is there anything anyone else wishes to comment on? Okay, well, can we move to the recommendation on page 19 that Executive adopts the Woking Borough Council School Organisation Plan 2025 to 30 and recognises that resources for delivery will be incorporated into future medium-term financial plan processes. Those in favour, please show. And that is unanimous, I'm glad to say. Thank you very much. Thank you, Prue. And now we move on to the first of two reports that are going to be presented by Adrian. And this one is, first one, the review of the current parking enforcement contract arrangements. And that begins on page 97 of your agenda. Adrian.
Thank you, Stephen. There's a comprehensive report in the reports pack for this evening. I'm just going to say a few words relating directly to the recommendations in the report. The Council undertakes its statutory duty of civil parking enforcement through an outsourced parking enforcement contract. This is set to expire on the 30th September 2026, and there is no option in the contract to extend. Our team has examined service delivery options from other local authorities with a view to recommending a delivery approach for when the contract expires, and has considered all options of insourcing, outsourcing and hybrids of those. The recommendation was considered by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee recently. The report in front of us tonight identifies the benefits and challenges of the different procurement options and recommends we seek a single outsourced supplier to manage the service. In considering this recommendation, we should note that whilst a contractor would be responsible for delivering the enforcement service, the Council will remain in full control of the policies they enforce and the performance standards in the contract. Civil parking enforcement in Woking Borough is a relatively small operation compared to many larger local authorities, and as a result, insourcing of the wide range of specialist services involved would present particular challenges at our scale of operation. And finally, our experience of outsourcing service delivery recently has been positive, and we believe it has represented value for money. With that in mind, the Executive is being asked this evening to authorise the recommended procurement process under a new Crown Commercial Services framework. seeking a single outsourced supplier to manage parking services. And secondly, to delegate authority for the award of the contract to the Director of Place and Growth in consultation with myself as lead member for active travel, transport and highways.
Well, thank you, Adrian. You've made me redundant at the end there by reminding everybody what the recommendations are. But just one point I wanted to make in relation to the report. I initially was actually very much in favour of bringing this service in-house and changing its scope so that we had effectively community wardens. I believe that some nod, at least to the second part of that, is incorporated in the way we're approaching this. We are envisaging these parking enforcement officers being the eyes and ears of the council on the ground and doing a little bit more than they've done under the current contract. But I am now, having seen all of the workings and the assessments of the options, reconciled to the fact that outsourcing to a single supplier is the best and most effective and most cost-effective way of dealing with this. So I personally will be supporting these recommendations. Is there anybody else who wants to comment or ask any questions? Mark.
Thank you, Adrian. That was great. Our parking enforcement officers are never likely to be considered favourably. However, I understand you spent a day with them recently. I just wondered how it went.
Yes, I did. I always like to go back to the shop floor whenever I take on a leadership role of any sort. I spent the best part of a day out with parking enforcement team, shadowing them on their duties. I didn't issue any tickets myself. I suspect I wasn't allowed to do so. But I was very impressed by the way in which they interpreted their remit and dealt sensitively with the public. On some occasions, they certainly had the legal right to issue enforcement notices, but chose not to do so in the interests of actually achieving the aim of parking enforcement, which is to make sure that our car parking arrangements operate effectively and that the roads are maintained as safe and clear to use. I have, at the ONS committee meeting where some questions were asked about parking enforcement, I have extended an offer to all councillors to do the same. And a couple have taken me up on that already, and I'd like to reiterate that tonight and to any other councillors who are listening. The team will very happily take you out and about and show you how they operate, the discretion they have, the policies we set which give reasonable discretion to residents. And I would commend to everybody to do the same if you have the opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Adrian. And I would confirm that there is now some flexibility and willingness to accommodate residents in the way this system is enforced, or rather the service is carried out. I think that reflects a point you made earlier about the way in which the council can influence the way in which our contractors operate, because we did have some early complaints and concerns about how the service was working, and I think those have been very successfully addressed through the relationship between the council and its contractor. So that reflects, your comments reflect that very well. So unless anyone else wants to say anything, if we can go to the two recommendations, which I won't bother reading out as they've been read out already by Adrian, on page 97. Those in support, please show. And that is everyone. Thank you very much. Now we come to the second of Adrian's reports to present. This is on residential parking permit policy, and it begins on page 115 of your agenda.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, tonight is parking night in the executive.
There are one or two other things as well, but it does seem heavily parking oriented.
I'm going to talk a little bit more about this because it's a little bit more complicated and directly affects a number of residents. This item covers a proposed new policy for residential parking zones in the borough. Those are locations where parking is restricted to those who live in the zone and are in possession of a residence permit, or their visitors for whom the resident has purchased a permit. You'll have seen the comprehensive report pack, but I want to summarise a few points now. The review was initiated to respond to concerns from residents in existing parking zones about the policy. The team spent some time benchmarking policies, good practices and pricing in neighbouring authorities. The policy aims to manage curbside demand for parking in these zones and contribute to road safety, to promote fairness and accessibility for residents and their visitors, whilst encouraging a shift towards more sustainable travel choices, and to deliver a parking scheme on a cost-neutral basis in accordance with the requirements of the Traffic Management Act. The proposed policy retains many aspects of the current policy, but with changes which will benefit residents in many areas, most notably the widening of permit areas from streets to zones, making it much more likely that a permit holder will find a parking space covered by their permit when they need it. We will introduce permits for visitors to people who live in the zones. We'll standardise how permit zones operate, which will improve parking availability for residents and make the regulations easier to understand for everybody. We will seek to influence parking space availability by introducing a tiered pricing model for households wishing to purchase more than one permit. We will improve the process for providing permits to those who care for individuals in a zone, be they a personal carer or a company. And we will remove a previous restriction on occupants of HMOs who will now have similar entitlement per household to other residents. An extensive consultation was undertaken via our Engage tool with more than 500 responses received, 58% of whom live in a residence parking zone. The report pack has a full analysis of the feedback. Most aspects of the policy received more support than opposition, but there were some issues arising. The first key issue was a need to review the proposed zoning of streets in the Wokingham town area, which didn't receive comprehensive support. This will be undertaken, and any changes will be published as a part of a future draft traffic regulation order, which will have its own consultation. There was net opposition to the charging structure overall, including the proposal for differential charging for a second car, particularly from households with 2 or more cars, though this proposal was supported by households with only 1 car. We are confident that our proposed charges and structures are fair, and they do support the aim of the policy to provide a fair solution for residents, given the limited parking availability in these areas. And finally, there was concern about the impact of the removal of a concession for pensioners, particularly on those who may be less well off. We intend to address this by introducing, we would address this by introducing a concession for any pensioners in receipt of pension credit. The proposed policy and consultation feedback were presented to the Corporate Community Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 4th of November, and there is a supplementary report in the pack with all of their comments and responses from the project team. I'll just highlight one point. Following the ONS meeting, we are arranging a further discussion with the Adult Social Care team on whether the proposed approach to carer permits can be improved further. However, as the new policy already significantly improves this aspect of the policy, it wouldn't be appropriate to delay implementation on the basis of this question any further, and we would incorporate any further improvements to the policy with appropriate approval in the future. I was then going to read out the recommendation, Stephen, but
you don't need to do that.
I'll leave that to you.
Well, indeed, thank you.
Ask if anyone has any questions or comments.
I have a comment, but I'm going to let Imogen go first.
Sure, mine's more of a statement, really. I mean, it's just that the lack of car parking spaces for anyone who lives close to Wokingham Town Centre. I know we can't magic up any more spaces, so it's making the best use of the spaces that we've got. And I strongly believe these changes to the parking permit scheme will increase the parking availability for those residents who need the spaces, and making the rules fair and consistent is also an important move. And I'm happy that we've consulted widely with the residents, and I think this is a good way forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Imogen. I really wanted to... Did you want to say something, Catherine? Yes, if I'll hold back and wait until everyone else who wants to speak on this has had a chance. Catherine.
Just a small point around, I think one thing I welcome in the policy is clarifying the process for assessing the need for new resident parking zones, because there are a number of areas within my ward, I'm sure, around the borough where this might be applicable, and I think that will provide much needed clarity.
Thank you. And that's, I didn't have time to go into everything, but that's one of the benefits of having now a consistent policy for the approach to these. In the past, new zones have had a bespoke approach designed for them, which has both complicated the implementation, but also made it much harder to actually find a solution in most areas.
So, speaking parochially, as a ward councillor for Twyford, Ruscombe and Hurst, I really welcome the moving ahead with schemes that will, I think, be generally very welcome in Twyford. There are some streets in Twyford, mainly Victorian and Edwardian terraced houses with no off-street parking, where there has been a long-term challenge, especially those that are near the station, and that's nearly all of them. We know there are particular pressures with Twyford Station and parking issues related to it. I have been working with residents in Brook Street in particular, seeking solutions to their particular challenges for many, many years. And it is a great relief to me, and I know it is to them, to see a scheme coming forward that will offer them a real prospect of improvement on their current situation. So I wanted to thank you, Adrian, for the work you've done, and all of your colleagues amongst the officers in the Highways Department for the work they've done on this. It really is greatly appreciated, and I think it will make a real difference in Twyford. So thank you. Unless there are anyone else wishes to say anything, I think we can go to the vote on the recommendations. So I'm not going to read them all out. You can read them yourself. They are on pages 115 and just tipping over into page 116. There are 5 recommendations. They relate to essentially our approving resident parking policy and approving the introduction of tiered pricing structure and approving the introduction of visitor permits, which I think are very welcome in many places, and approving the introduction of proposed zones within Twyford, with the exception of London Road, which will retain its own bespoke system, which was greatly welcomed by the residents there, I can assure you, and to note the individual executive member decision process we used to make the decision on proposed changes to other resident permit zone boundaries. And that, I think, is all you need to know in order to vote on this. So those in favour, please show. And I'm very pleased to say that is unanimous. So we're moving on apace. Well, we're moving on anyway. And we're now going to page 235 of our agenda for what I think is another good news item. This is relating to the provision of a new community centre in Arborfield, and I'll be presenting this report. As I've said, I believe this really constitutes another good news item on this evening's agenda, as it involves the delivery, or the process by which we will deliver, a long-awaited community facility in Arborfield Green, and the involvement of the local community in decision-making on this subject. Now, planning consent was originally granted for the refurbishment and extension of the existing Ministry of Defence building and its conversion into a community centre. However, after review and extensive engagement with the local community, the recommendation before you is that we adopt a different approach, a new build rather than a conversion. And a purpose-built new facility can better meet community aspirations, will be environmentally more sustainable, and will be cheaper to operate. So I think this is the best solution, and I would commend it to colleagues. I shamelessly adopted a parochial approach to the last subject, so I'm going to give Adrian the chance to turn the tables on me and be parochial in this one. This is in your ward. Adrian, would you like to comment on this?
It is. I'd very much like to be parochial for a short moment. As councillor for the area, I'm delighted this project is finally able to move forward with a clear strategy for how it'll be delivered, albeit there are still some details to be determined. It's been a slow start to community facilities in the Arborfield Green area, and understandably there's some scepticism about the future amongst residents. However, more recently the new supermarket has been transformational in terms of people's attitudes, and the local Stables Cafe, our first bit of new infrastructure, has a very dedicated following. New plan is a big improvement on the 2023 refurbishment proposal and is much more likely to succeed in the long term, I believe. I would like to highlight the contribution to this decision from the local parishes, parish councils, including particularly Barkham Parish Council, who've undertaken their own research into the best way to do this and have supported the WBC team throughout in making these recommendations. There's still some detail to work through, most importantly to determine the best value, scope and size of the facility, and to work out how the most important aspects of this are funded. And residents regularly remind me of the priority they place on local primary health care. And I continue to hope that the combined forces of the council, RMP and others will prevail with the NHS in addressing this omission, whether that's through a contribution to the community centre or separately. But the route delivering this important facility will be clear if approved tonight, and I really look forward to helping progress this within the target of completion by the end of 2027.
Thank you, Adrian. I too have visited the Stables Cafe and can vouch for its importance to the local community. It was absolutely buzzing with people when I visited. Therefore, I think we've reached the point where we should look at the recommendations on page 235 of your agenda. And to summarise those, we're being asked to approve the proposed delivery model, delegate to the Director of Resources and Assets in consultation with the leader and the Executive Member of Resident Services, Inclusion and Fighting Poverty, that's Rachel, to complete the development agreement with the Defence Infrastructure Organisation for the delivery model of the new community centre, approve the addition of a capital budget equal to the capital contribution from the Defence Infrastructure Organisation into the medium-term financial plan for the year 2026-27, and approve the commencement of the process to identify a preferred operator for the new community centre. So could I ask for the support of those who are in favour of this? And that is everybody. Thank you very much. Right. And we come to the final report of this evening, which starts on page 243 of your agenda, and it's Imogen's chance to
thank you,
have a say.
Wow, yes, you've all been waiting for this one. Okay, sorry. Yes, the Treasury Management Mid-Year Update is all about how the Council manages its money and that it holds and the amounts that it needs to borrow to meet the Council's needs. And this is the update on the first 6 months of the year 25-26. There are a number of positive recommendations to note at the beginning of the report, but I'd like to highlight that our external debt was forecast to be 138 million by March 2026, but now we are expecting that to be reduced to 127 million, which will therefore reduce the amount of money we have to pay in interest to external bodies. This is all good news in the current economic climate, as we need this council to be really as efficient as possible at this point in time. The external rate of borrowing in 25-26 is forecast to be around 4.18%, and we're hoping this will reduce in forthcoming months. But our overall cost of capital is now largely being funded from investment income from commercial and regeneration projects, and the Investor Save schemes, and it is a vast improvement on where we were when the Lib Dems took over this council in 2022. Our forecast general fund capital financing requirement at the 31st of March 2026 is expected to be significantly lower than the estimate set out in the strategy at 386 million from 429 million. This is due to the reduced capital spending from making savings and reprofiling projects. The housing revenue account external borrowing continues to be 91 million, which is the same level as the previous year. There is a lot more in this report for those who really want to read more into it and what's going on, and includes our table of investments and when the loans mature. Sadly, while this is all good news, it will not compensate for the loss of income that Woking Borough Council is expecting if the proposed fairer funding settlement goes through as planned. Our risks include also include the dedicated schools grant, which is the money that is borrowed to pay for special needs children. The interest from the loan that comes from this, the interest from the loan comes from our revenue and is therefore threatening to increase our needs to borrow more. However, it does show that the council is working hard to control its expenditure and manage its finances. I'm only really left to thank everybody involved in controlling our spending, and this includes all of the councillors as well, and our officers for managing the funds that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Imogen. I would completely endorse your final sentiments in particular about the role of our officers and colleagues in, and so far as colleagues are concerned, led ably by you in just making sure that we approach the council's finances in a responsible way and ensure that we do our best to ensure that these are sustainable for the long term. No council can deliver services for its residents that's financially insolvent, and we have worked very hard to try and make sure the council is in as good a position as it can be in these very difficult circumstances. And I'd like to thank you and all of our councillor colleagues and all of the officers who've worked so hard on this. So I'm going to, unless anybody wants to comment on this, I don't see a flood of hands going up, so I'm assuming that we're all content, but I'm going to just try and summarise quickly the recommendations. The first one, we're essentially required to support the Treasury Management mid-year report and recommend it to Council, and note, we should be noting, prudential indicators are set to provide guidelines to work within and in accordance with the expectations set at the beginning of the year. And we have a requirement to report progress against these. Also to note that all approved indicators set out in the Treasury Management Strategy have been adhered to. And also to note that as at the end of September 2025, the forecast for the total external general fund debt is 138 million at March 2026, which reduces to 127 million after taking into account cash balances, and is considerably lower than the estimate set out in the strategy of 199 million. And that, as Imogen has said, reduce interest costs in the current economic climate. To also note an improved position for the ratio of financing costs to net revenue stream, the general fund prudential indicator from the forecast when the strategy was set. And then also to note the forecast general fund capital financing requirement at 31st of March 2026 is significantly lower than the estimates set out in the strategy at £386 million rather than 429 million. So if we can note all of those things and also accept and recommend to Council the Treasury Management mid-year report. Those in favour, please show. Thank you very much, everybody. That is unanimous. And that, I think, brings our meeting to a close. Thank you very much, everyone, for all of your work. And thank you very much for all being here as well. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.